Sure, let's do it. So a quick summary of Act 60 is that it is Puerto Rican legislation that provides Americans with massive tax breaks and incentivizes them to move to Puerto Rico to start a business, and Puerto Ricans are not eligible for these same tax exemptions. So in 2017, there was a federal tax reform that created the Opportunity Zones program to attract investments and generate economic development in low-income communities, which to me just sounds like gentrification. In 2019, the Puerto Rican government approved Act 21, which is Puerto Rico's Opportunity Zones and Economic Development Act, but there's another 2019 act, Act 60, which is Puerto Rico's Incentive Code, which adopted the regulations of Act 21, consolidating Act 20 and 21's tax incentives under Act 60. And in order to attract investors, the government has designated 98% of Puerto Rico to be an opportunity zone. Look at this. It's the entire country. All of it. And these areas can be developed as hotels and other businesses relating to tourism, malls, high-tech companies, research and manufacturing, and the development of residential or commercial properties to rent or sell. So going back to the initial question, what's the proof that Act 60 harms Puerto Rico? Let's talk about it. So because of the tax incentives and the opportunity zones, we're seeing no protection of Puerto Rico's natural resources and land, and the opportunity for ecologically protected land to be purchased for development, and the purchasing of historical buildings for colonizers to renovate and use for profit-making purposes. We're seeing gentrification in areas like San Juan, Rincon, Vieques, and many others, which raise property values, pushing Puerto Ricans out of their communities that they've always lived in. And there are a lot of articles that talk about this. I recommend this article too. We're seeing efforts to rezone land in Vieques, which could designate current agricultural land as land to be used for tourism, residential, and industrial purposes. And for an island that already struggles with food scarcity, this could ruin the rich farming soil for the benefit of tourists. And there's a whole lot that I can't even cover in this video, but I want to leave you with one final thought. Just because Puerto Rico is attracting investors who claim to be bringing in jobs and wealth doesn't mean that they're actually benefiting Puerto Ricans. That's what the lobbyists and the colonizers want you to think. They want you to think that they're saviors, and they have to silence the voices of the people they're harming so that they can continue to receive tax breaks and increase their wealth. We can just listen and trust Puerto Ricans and their perspectives without needing data to back up their lived experiences, because putting our trust and faith in colonizers to accurately report on their violence over Puerto Ricans who are actually experiencing colonialism firsthand is white supremacy in action. So in summary, Act 60 is violent and we should abolish it.
There's an additional element, which is that Puerto Ricans that have been living in Puerto Rico are also not eligible for those tax incentives. So it is very clearly a plan to replace the population of Puerto Rico by bringing in wealthy investors on the model, I think, of what happened in Hawaii more than a century ago, right? Where eventually Puerto Rico will be merely, the population of Puerto Rico will be merely in positions of servitude to wealthy investors and vacationers in Puerto Rico. That's the vision for so-called economic development in Puerto Rico, and it's a nightmare for anyone committed to, continuing to see Puerto Rico be Puerto Rico, be full of Puerto Ricans, Puerto Rican culture. We're seeing all of that under threat.